now we'll be live in just a minute. Like now. Finally. Wow. Nearly 15 minutes late. Apologies, everyone tuning in. And apologies, Paul, who's been gracefully sitting.
No, it's all good. It's funny how sometimes 15 feels like forever and sometimes 15 minutes feels like it's an instant, right? It just depends upon where you're sitting.
It feels like forever when you're scrambling about trying to get the technology to work. I'll tell you that much.
For sure.
But here we go. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Let me just make sure that it's coming through here. I'm assuming it is. But yeah, anyway, welcome everybody. Welcome. Dustin's not seeing it. I'm not seeing it either. But I'm assuming something's happening because it looks as though we've gone live. But looks like we might have issues again. Do we have issues again, Dustin?
I don't see it, but
yeah, I'm not seeing it either. Didn't get a notification or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, it's not happening again, is it?
At this point, I wonder if we just record it and put it out like normal.
Let me just see if it's live on YouTube because I think that might be the. I think it's something to do with LinkedIn. Yes.
Yeah, somebody noted. Yeah.
Yeah, it's live. Yeah, I'm hearing myself on YouTube about 5 minutes later. Cool. Right. Anyway, I'm going to post this link in YouTube for those people that are trying to get there on LinkedIn. Apologies for the messing around. It looks as though the streaming tool that we use is not broadcasting into the event like it should, and therefore we are in this situation with a podcast that we've been queuing up and lining up for how long, Paul? This has been months.
I don't know how many months. Yeah, exactly.
It's been
I'd say
months.
15 months. 1 month for every minute.
Yeah. That's about right. But thank you for joining us anyway, and thank you for persevering and persisting. I really appreciate it. So tell us what's been going on. We did start this recording. For those of you that have eventually tuned in, we did start this recording. We started having a conversation, then we realized we weren't live.
Yeah.
And so we'll rerun that first couple of minutes. But Paul, tell us what you've been up to. Where have you been all my life?
Yeah, it's been great. Well, we just had Alexa live, I don't know how long ago, a month back, maybe something like that. And I've just been with the team working on a bunch of new capabilities for skill builders. So there's a couple areas where I'm really excited about. It's just completely new kinds of experiences that you just couldn't do before. I've just seen so many things that the community has been trying to build, and now I think we're going to get to the point where we can start to unlock some of those new kind of experiences. So I'm pretty excited about what was showed off there. See what people do with it.
And you yourself, Paul, you were saying that you've changed teams recently. You're now on the product team where you were doing education before, right?
I was doing the education team before, and so that was like getting out. We had evangelists and tech doc writers and curriculum builders and stuff like that, and really got to be out with the community a lot. So it was really neat to see everything that was happening there. But yeah, now working on the product team, trying to bring that developer perspective and that skill builder perspective to the team, and just sort of help shape what are we gonna go deliver, what are we gonna focus on. Yeah.
Cool. And you've hit us with a whirlwind worth of features over the last period. We were saying just before we come on air, you were saying that it's the most features ever released at one time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we release a lot of features every year, but a lot of times they sort of dribble out, and just as soon as something's ready, we just throw it out. And one of the pieces of feedback from developers was like, how do I keep up with all this? How do I know what's happening and when, and how does it all come together? And so this was a bit of an opportunity to pull it all together into one developer event, get out that whole story, hang the features together so you could see how to use them. And, depending upon what hat you wear, if you're thinking about design or you're thinking about marketing or thinking about development, you can like take a slice of it and figure out where to head. So yeah, got it all pulled together for this Alexa Live developer event.
Can we expect that more going forward, these bigger semi-annual, annual, however, release cycles?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're never going to stop shipping features. So you're going to, keep watching the new launches pages all the time. But if you really think about like these big story moments, we want to make sure that we pull a collection of features together and give you everything you need to accomplish that. So yeah, you'll see like continuous improvement. Like we're not going to hold anything back, but it's also trying to just land these big moments together. Yeah.
Yeah, and so certainly there were lots and lots of new stuff that was announced and some expansions. But would you say there was perhaps a theme throughout all of these, or some
Yeah.
unifying thing in between the new features?
There's a couple themes. One chunk of the features was about enabling new experiences. I mean, we've just seen people building amazing stuff with what's available now, but then wanting to do more. So there's a chunk of new experiences that are just around enabling more natural, deeper tasks. So like, for example, today, what I love about voice is I can just think of something and it's happening. Like turn on the light, set a timer, play a game, answer a trivia question. You know, I can just like think it and it's happening. And it's just this really neat moment. But the thing is, I have more complex thoughts than that. You know, sometimes I want to actually like order pizza and do that. Yeah, right. And so, you know, we see a lot of skill builders, you know, pushing into building more complex experiences than just call and response kinds of things. And, you know, we've talked a lot about different kinds of design approaches to deal with that and all sorts of things. But you know, with Alexa Conversations, you start to get into completely different ways to even architect how you're going after that. So really leaning on AI-based stuff to help build that out. So that's really cool. Other experiences that we're unlocking is like this whole like how you feel the experience. So there's a lot of stuff in the multimodal area with screens and interactive games and audio layering. So you can just build these soundscapes out, just make it more immersive feeling. And then we're also kind of pushing into this new set of experiences around on the go. So, you know, so far we've mostly focused on, hey, there's a device sitting in your kitchen or in your living room or whatever, but there's earbuds and there's frames and there's mobile. There's a lot of different ways to make use of Alexa. And when you know, of course, you can just take your normal experience to those, but when you really think about what would be useful, you start to find some new customer experience patterns that you want to unlock. So there's a bunch of on-the-go kind of experiences that we've been able to start to open up. I guess one other thing besides those experiences is just, and how do you get traffic? Like, you know, you got a business to operate here, and so how do we get more traffic, more revenue, optimize your experience, and that kind of stuff. So like new experiences and then optimize your business are the kind of two major buckets.
That's good. I think that's a good way of summarizing it as well, because it's like, and what we'll do for those tuning in, we'll run through some of these kind of some of the new features and stuff like that. But I think you put it across really well there, in that there's features for kind of designers and developers to make you create more immersive experiences, but then at the same time you've got things that help people get discovered more. You've also got kind of deeper integrations with mobile, iOS and Android, and so it's kind of like it's starting to get to a point where I know that Amazon hasn't had, you know, a phone out there for a while and stuff like that, but it's a lot of these kind of changes or updates and whatnot have kind of took it a little bit further and deeper into the mobile ecosystem and tried to make, you know, that whether it's on the go, but in general, just more of an end-to-end Alexa kind of experience, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just when you think about doing something, you can just do it. You have your computing at your fingertips, right? Is the kind of the idea, or not your fingertips even. You have your computing around you ambiently.
On the tip of your tongue.
On the tip of your tongue and fingers, yeah.
So Dustin, let's where do you want to start with this? I mean, there's 31 features, and we've probably got, like, given that we started a bit late, even if we had an hour, that's like 2 minutes per feature, and so realistically we're not going to get through all of that kind of thing. But I thought what we would do, what would be a bit of fun, is that we can kind of bring up some of the things that we find have been useful, or some of the things that we've been excited about, and try and like delve into a little bit of those, so we can help designers and developers understand what they are, and also businesses and marketers understand kind of how they can utilize these things. And then, you know, now that we're on YouTube, we've had some issues with LinkedIn. Apologies again for that. We're on YouTube. We've got a few people tuning in here. If you are tuning in on YouTube, feel free, stick some questions about these features in the comments, and we'll put those questions to Paul as well. So Dustin, where do you want to start? What was your top kind of feature that was brought about, and why? And then let's have Paul kind of delve a little bit further into it.
Yeah, I don't know if this was necessarily my top, but this is maybe a big one to start, and we might actually be causing some trouble here. So you'll need to keep us on time, Kane. Alexa Conversations. I think that's a big one. It's a potentially it seems like a big change in how you build skills. So can you tell us more about that? What it is, when people would use it, what advantages it gives?
Yeah. First of all, I like that you say it's a big change. It's a weird mixed story, because it's actually, you can just integrate it in with your normal skills and do the way you build skills today, and then sort of add this in and slowly migrate into it. At the same time, it is a big change. I mean, it's a different way of thinking about building your experiences. And I mean, if you remember back to when skills first came out, and you'd like, there's an intent and utterances, and what are these things, and how does it all work? And the concept of making use of AI to do skills was like blow your mind. I mean, I remember a lot of times I was talking about, this list is training data. It's not an array or an enum. Like, people might say something that's not in your slot values, and it'll come through. So that same kind of a learning curve is going to happen again with Alexa conversations. I mean, everybody has a much better feel for how the interactions go now, but you pull it over, and instead of thinking about all the paths that you might have to take and dealing with every single possible combination, what you're really focusing on is the core experience that you want to nail. So a few things. First of all, the APIs you're going to call, right? When you're done, let's take pizza. When you're done ordering a pizza, you got an API to call. You make the order, and then you call the API. So you know that, and some basic happy paths and some basic correction paths and all that kind of stuff. So what you do is you focus on entering those dialogues, the whole back and forth between the user and Alexa, and you annotate them. So you talk about, slot values and those kinds of things, but also, when do you call an API? What's the point of this thing? And then the result is the AI system kicks in and starts to go, okay, let me generate other dialogues, other paths, and all these possibilities. And it deals with that combinatorial explosion. And what would happen before was people would do that thing. They would basically flowchart out a basic set of paths, and then I would describe it as developer and designer fatigue. They'd get tired and go like, I can't come up with every possible combination of this, right? And that would end up with some brittle experiences where, if you did it right, if the customer did everything right, it was beautiful and it worked perfectly. And if the customer veered out on their own a little bit, it would start to fall apart. And so conversations is really focused on addressing that. And I think what you'll see is, it's like day one of that. And so we just start improving, and people pile on and start building. We see where they're headed with it. So I'm really inspired by it, because I feel like it's this take what we've gotten to here and then start a new beginning, and then go figure out where we're going to go from there. And again, they do bleed very well together. Like, you can just build a normal skill and just say, hey, I'm going to call it to Alexa Conversations now, and come back. You can look at the pizza reference skill to see how that's done. So it's easy to dip your toes in the water, but I would say dip your toes in and just like dwell in it for a minute and just try it out and be open to how it's a little bit different, and dive in there. There's a contest for it, by the way. If you go to alexaconversations.devpost.com, and that'll be a great experience to like see what other people are building, and see all the training materials on it and all that kind of stuff. I feel like this is one of those things over the next couple of years where everybody's going to have to really start to understand how this plays out and how it works.
Yeah. And so correct me if I'm wrong then. So what it is, because I've had a lot of questions about this,
Okay.
and this is the kind of thing that it is hard for people to wrap their head around, I think. So essentially what it means is, you provide your skill with your intent and your slots, and the points at which you might need to make various API calls or whatnot, and some sample utterances, as you would do with your intents and that kind of stuff. And then, rather than you mapping out the flow of, okay, first of all, we're expecting this intent with these slots, and if we don't get this slot, then we're going to have to go back and ask them for that slot and confirm this then, and then that might lead to this path. And then, so rather than you doing all of that stuff, you just specify essentially the raw materials, and the Alexa kind of, the AI side will piece together what that dialogue and what those kind of how those conversations should flow. Is that right?
Yeah, that's close. You started that by saying you provide intents and slots, and that's actually not where you start. That is where you start with custom skills, but in this case, you start with dialogues. You just start with the back and forth interaction. And yeah, there are slots in there that'll be filled along the way, and there are APIs that you're going to call, but it's much more about that dialogue than it is about an intent. And then there's things like, because you've gotten that dialogue, it's taking care of all the variations, right? Like you were describing, you don't have to figure out all the variations. The second thing it's taking care of is all the context. So, if you said, partway through making an order of a pizza and you say, oh, make that a large, it knows what that is because it's keeping track of the context for you. And so in addition to not have to manage all those paths, you don't have to manage all of the possible state machines that you'd be keeping and so forth. So yeah, so it is like what you described. It's just think first about dialogues rather than, you don't really need to like break them down into intents as much. Yeah, so you think about those dialogues and how you're going to have compose these responses. Yeah, so I think a good way to know when you're going to want to use one of these is when you want to gather a bunch of information from people, right? And then you can go on your way. So the obvious things are like task completion, like I've said, pizza ordering. Roomba is doing something cool with their robots where you can say like, hey, vacuum a specific room on Wednesday because we're gonna have a party that night or whatever. And so you can say something more complex. Or Big Sky, you can talk more about how to set your triggers for, if there's a certain weather event happening in a certain region. And so there's quite a bit of information you have to give to make that really work. And this really helps with that back and forth. I think there's an opportunity for games too. Not all games. Like I wouldn't use this for a quiz game. It doesn't make any sense because that's a boom, 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 back and forth thing. but maybe I wonder about like an escape the room style experience where you're in the room and you have to, provide all the right answers to the clues all at once. And once they all come together, then you can proceed, So it's those kinds of things that you're thinking about. So that's the big mind shift, is it's about dialogues first.
On that note, one question I have is, you also announced the controls framework as well. And so these seem to potentially have maybe a little bit of overlap in purpose. When would you go with the controls framework versus conversations?
Personally, I'm going to use them both all the time because I think they complement really well. There is some overlap. So the controls framework for me is really good for like moving people through the logic of your skill, right? So like, now it's time to gather dates, or now it's time to order pizza, now it's time to whatever it is. And the controls framework is great for that. If you think about today, when you build a skill, you have these intent handlers, and it's this very linear list of intent handlers. And it's just like, whichever one hits first is going to happen. With controls, you have a root controller, and you can have logic to go like, oh no, I can now go here. So for example, in a custom skill, if you just say yes at some point, you will have to kept track about what that yes means and what it relates to, and it would hit a yes intent. With controls, you can just say, hey, the last control that was doing something is this one, route it to them, and then it says, oh, it has a yes handler and it can deal with it its special way, and other controls would too, right? So the reason I say they work really well together is because once you get down into that part of your logic, you can just say, hey, interop out, like go out to Alexa Conversations, let it do its job for a little while, and it'll come back, and then you can carry on. So I think the two blend really well. Now, you're right, there is an overlap in that, you can play either extreme. You could say a skill has no Alexa Conversations in it. It's all built with controls and the SDK and all that. That's totally fine. Or you could say a skill is built completely with Alexa Conversations. I just think, particularly in the beginning, but probably forever, there's going to be a blend of those things. And I think it's up to your team, like your designers and your developers and their preferences and their comfort and what they've been doing to decide where that line is between those two different things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. I'm being told by Artem, thank you, Artem, to stop talking and get to the comments. So, so your wish is my command, mate. Your wish is my command. Right. I'm going to keep this one related to Alexa Conversations, and then we can come back to some of the other ones after that. So the one that we have from Richard Wazeka, and apologies if I'm butchering your name, mate. How might the role of a conversational designer change with greater use of Alexa Conversations?
Well, some parts of it are the same. That whole like have one person pretend to be a human and one person pretend to be Alexa, and then having this back and forth conversation kind of stuff, that all still holds true. And thinking about how you're going to work through that experience, the parts that start to change are in the details. So in skill building, part of the details that a conversational designer has to go into is like, what is the state? What's happening? What are the situations that are going on? And how do I respond in those particular states? And how do I error correct in these ways, right? And you start to you have to program everything. So you're going to detail all that out. In Alexa Conversations, the details become more about how do you annotate those dialogues and how do you map what people are saying into the APIs that are going to be called, and how do you compose those responses? So like, what visuals do they have, and what do they sound like, and what's the APL or the audible experience that you're going to have, and now you can mark that up quite a bit and do a lot more stuff. So I think you start to bleed more that direction in the conversational piece, but the core of it's the same. I mean, it's about we're expressing ourselves, to this machine. So how's that going to work?
Cool. That's good.
Any other questions, Kane, from the comments?
From the comments, let's have a look. We've got some questions about the app availability in Ukraine. Yeah, I don't know whether you have any insight on that, Paul, but apparently it's not available in Ukraine.
We haven't responded.
Yeah. Is there a possibility for additional wake words in the Alexa smartphone app? I think I don't know whether we're going to get into that, but it would assume I would assume that if it's the Alexa app invoking the Alexa assistant, I would probably imagine that that's going to stay the same for quite a while. Richard's commented again, which is, do we still have conversation flows as a deliverable? So if he's working as a conversation designer on a project, he's got a client, they want to see how the dialogue's going to go, they want to understand what they're going to get for their money. Would you still, if you're using Alexa Conversations, would you still provide those kind of architecture diagrams and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I think that even before Alexa Conversations, I was an advocate of using storyboards instead of flowcharts, because I like how storyboards still tell the story and communicate the value without, running you into the flowchart place. But the flowchart stuff is really convenient. I mean, you can mock things up really quickly. You can build full-on great live skills just by doing that. You grab voice flow or something like that, and you can just jam through it and build it. So I think you're still going to be doing that for a while. I think what you might do now is start to change where you end it. So like there might be a flow that covers the main branching parts and entrance parts of your experience, and then at some point you go, okay, now we've got a job to do. Like we're going to go gather some information and do that job, and you just put a box there for that whole job, and you don't have to like map out 18 pages on tabloid size paper. I guess I don't know what that would be in like D4 paper. I don't know what they call that, but like huge paper. So anyway, I think you're that same mindset of like, how do people go through this still has to be covered, but you don't have to get every little branch now, right? That's the key.
Shout out to Braden. I think he's tuning in. He's commented earlier on. I don't know if he's still hanging around, but he was involved at the beginning. So shout out to Braden from VoiceFlow. Fantastic tool. We use that all the time.
Great crew over there too.
Yeah, definitely. Dustin, what's next on your list?
Yeah, so moving on to new features, another thing is actually the solution to a mystery, a 3 or 4 year old mystery. And when I was writing the book on how to build skills here, one of the things I did was I went through the JSON. I said, I got to understand every single thing that's in there. Somebody's going to ask, I need to understand what it is. And I came across one, which was resolutions per authority. And I was like, this is only ever one value. This is an array. What's going on here? And finally, we know now that we can have, what was it called? Alexa entities. So what is that? The new entities?
Yeah. So, and there's others too. But yeah, so what this is, so like, let me give an example of what resolutions are about. So let's say you get back a slot value, right? And it says, let's say you said, I don't know, let's say your slot was about types of animals. So you had a dog, cat, alligators, or whatever, and you said St. Bernard, right? And so in your skill, what you might have done is you might have said dog is the value, and then St. Bernard and all sorts of other kinds of dogs were synonyms for that. And then what would happen is the resolution authority would say, I have resolved St. Bernard to dog. And in that resolution authority, you could, in the JSON, you could look at it and go like, oh, well, they said St. Bernard, but what they meant is dog, or what I care about is dog. So I'm going to go use that in my skill logic now. Now there's other resolution authorities. So you'll get that same one as you would, but then you can also get one where the person said St. Bernard, it sends it off to Alexa entities, which is this whole knowledge graph that's built into Alexa, and it'll come back with what it thinks that means, right? So it could say it's a dog, or it could say it's whatever it might be. Like you might have said something like calories in a slice of pizza, and it'll come back and say, oh, it's 840 or whatever. That's a big slice maybe, but it can sort of resolve those things for you. And then you can in the JSON look at what did the person say and what did the resolution authority translate that into. So now you can look at both in the array.
Bondad has commented saying, resolutions per authority definitely burned me in the past as new
coded it.
started creeping in there before we knew about them.
Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
Cool. Dustin, what any other thoughts and features on the technical side? This has been interesting. I'm learning stuff here, so this is all good for me.
Yeah. I think there's a few more. I think there's a lot on the design and on the marketing side. So maybe just cover a couple more. And one is skill resumption, which sounds very, very, very interesting. What is that? How does that work?
Okay. So here's the basic scenario. You are interacting with a skill, and then you're not really done with that experience, but you don't need to interact with it again for a while, maybe for a few seconds, a few minutes, or even a few hours, right? So an example of this would be like, I say, this was really spawned through the motivation of on the go. It can be useful for a lot of scenarios, but if you think about on the go, it's easier to see it. So an example is hey, Alexa, let's start my run, right? And I get some like hype up thing, and then I get some music, and then I'm going. And I'm still running, right? But I'm not interacting with Alexa that whole time. So what can happen is that skill can go into the background, and then there's two ways that it can resume. One way is the skill developer can say, hey, it's been 15 minutes, some trigger happens, right? And they say, it's been 15 minutes. Let's say, good job, keep it going. Let me hype you up some more, and then go back into the background, right? Another scenario is the customer can resume it. So the customer can just say, Alexa, how much longer? So instead of saying, Alexa, ask the fitness skill how much longer, they say, Alexa, how much longer? And you're going again. An example of this would be like with Uber, right? We were looking at that, and you'd say something like, your car is around the corner, right? So you go request the car, and it says, in your earbuds, it's around the corner, you should go get it. Or you could say, Alexa, how far is my car away? And it'd say 4 minutes. So that's the basic scenario. And again, it doesn't have to be about on the go. It could be anything you're after, but that's the real new kind of use case we're trying to push into.
So it goes in both directions, right? The user can resume, and the skill can resume as well.
That's right.
How is that kind of initiated? How do you make it go into the background for it to then be kind of called back upon again?
Yeah, the skill builder does that. So the customer experience of it is, you say, hey, I'm going to go on my run, and it says, hey, do you want me to keep motivating you throughout your run? You want me to come back? And you say, yeah. And then that gives it permission to do skill resumption. And once you've given it permission, now it can come back and let you know what's going on. So really, the customer gives permission for it to resume. The customer doesn't need to give it permission to go into the background. Yeah.
That's good.
And it's not really, it's weird to say background, because a lot of people think about mobile apps when you think about background, where it's actually back there processing and stuff. And that's not really the case. What actually happens is it's waiting for a cue, right? Like, a time event happened off, the skill fires up again, and then it goes, okay, I have permission, so now I'm going to let the user know what's going on. So.
And I see Richard is asking a question about this, which is, if there's multiple skills that are in the background, so to speak, how does it handle that?
Yeah, well, for now, it's one. We're in the beta period, and we're seeing what's happening. So we'll see how often people want to background multiple things. But right now, it's just the last one that you were using, which seems to cover most of the cases. But
yeah. So Richard's example was, what happens if I order a pizza in one and a 6-pack in another? He's my kind of guy.
The 6-pack will win. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, it's prioritize based on prioritize based on what you've ordered. Mike has said skill resumption is going to be so great. I do agree with that. I think that we'll come on to some of the more sort of like business marketing focused sort of things that are in there, but I think this is kind of related to one of them. I think it's that you mentioned that you don't have to reinvoke the skill again. You don't have to ask Alexa to ask the skill to do something. It's kind of just there simmering around, and you can think of, there's the exercise use case, there's the taxi use case, but essentially any skill really that is there to serve, like, not necessarily like a lean in experiential experience like a game where you're zoned in and you're concentrating, but pretty much any other either productivity based, utility based, could be a shopping example. The vast majority of other skills that aren't a lean in kind of experience could benefit from something like this, and just be able to get back into it and carry on from where you left off, or do whatever, without needing to reinvoke the skill again. I think there's so much potential with that.
I'm super curious to see where the community takes this and what ideas they come up with and talk about. This is an example. This is a completely new use case. Like, I don't know what people will do with it and how it'll work out. But there's also a vein of this naturalness, right? Like, the more we can just have customers just do what they would naturally do, conversations or this or others, like, then it's just sort of opens up these new cases.
That's interesting.
Maybe, Kane, a good thing to move on to now, which will bleed into the design part of it, is the changes to APL. So a lot of it was announced to APL. Certainly JSX for APL is interesting, but probably not the biggest thing for sure. One of the things the thing that I think people are most excited about, or I've seen the most talk about, is APL-A.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm actually really excited about this too. So at the core, it's layered audio, right? You can like compose audio at runtime. So here's a scenario: you're building a game and you're fighting a dragon with a sword, and it should sound like swords and dragons, right? And what if you drop your sword, or your sword breaks because of its hit points or something like that, and now you're fighting a dragon with a shield, and so it should sound different, right? The way that you would have to build that prior to this feature is you would have to pre-record all the combinations of all of the weapons and all of the monsters and all that kind of stuff. And now you can start to like change out those sounds. And so instead of having, all the combinations of all the sounds, you have your 100 bass sounds and you compose them programmatically at runtime. So that really lowers the production cost and raises the production value. The other thing you can do is you can put background audio behind text to speech. So even for a non-game, that's pretty interesting, just to give it a little bit of a mood and that kind of stuff. One thing that people often say about this is like, hey, that's APL. I've been avoiding that because I didn't want to get into screens yet or whatever. And first of all, you should get into screens because that's a big deal. But at the same time, it's not that you have to take all of it at once, right? APL is about a presentation language, right? It's about describing how you're going to present the results to customers through sound and through visual, and you can imagine over time through any sort of modality, right? This is the point of it, is to allow like all sorts of crazy devices, like the little dot with the clock on it. That's through APL-A, right? Or APL. So anyway, you can use Alexa APL-A just if you don't have a device with a screen, right? And just want it to sound really cool.
I think that, again, the potential for that is huge, because definitely for games and stuff like that, the what you'd have to do previously is exactly as you described. Is you have a sound bed, you'd need sound effects on top. They need to be basically, you need to build a scene. But then if you want anything to do with text to speech in there, you need essentially, what I've done in the past is gone to Poly, grabbed the voice, downloaded it, and then I've had to stick it inside the actual audio file to create the effects. But it was interesting how you mentioned that beyond games, because I think that's where I know it's got value for games, but I think that's where it has some real like potential. Because if you imagine I always try and think of a really boring example, like checking what time the post office is open, right? Something like that, where the utility that it provides is real. If someone needs to go and send a parcel, then they need to know that information. It's a lot easier to ask Alexa than it is to go and get out your phone or whatever. But just a simple thing like that can be made so much better if, when the skill opens, it's the sound of a door opening, and then it's the sound of the post office room kind of in there, and then you've got the voice over the top of it, and then when you ask about sending a parcel, there's a noise of a sellotapes taping up a parcel, and all that kind of stuff is the ability to create what would seemingly be mundane but more practical use cases and make them more experiential.
I think so. And I think you're right. It's a very subtle but powerful thing. Like, one of the challenges with particularly voice only, but even with voice plus screen, is how do you set expectations for the customer? How do you help them know what's possible and what's around and what's there? And so subtle clues like, that sound of the parcel in the background, you're about post stuff right now. So like, I think there's a lot of potential there. Yeah.
David Law, shout out to David Law. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, holy cow.
Hey, ex-colleague of yours.
Yeah.
He said about 4 years ago, we had an Alexa summit where the UK team made Alexa rap on top of a beat, and we had to pre-record the whole thing with layered audio via APL. Would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah. I actually remember that demo. I was there.
Really?
I want to
find that. I'd like to find that, to be honest. I would imagine you had a hell of a work to be done there in terms of actually making sure she's on beat.
I actually saw one at, there was a hackathon at Stanford, probably about that same time, and they took 2 Alexas, and they had one that was the hype, right? And then the other, which is the rapping, and they had some they said, okay, let's go. And you would give the hype one like an artist, and you'd say rap in the style of so-and-so, and it'd go, okay, here we go. And it would get it all hyped up, and then it would send it over to the other device. And then that device would actually, take some random passage and then do it in the style of that artist. And it was just really funny to watch the 2 devices go back and forth and stuff like that. It was neat.
Class. That is class. I like the way you're explaining about APL there, though, because I must admit, when APL was first announced and launched and stuff like that, I very much thought it was all about visual. I thought it was, it's a way of visually presenting stuff and a language that allows you to do that. But when you think about, if it's a language of presenting anything as such, then it starts to get a lot more interesting, with the audio side of things. And then, I don't know whether they'll have like haptics, and they mentioned the clock, being able to customize what's on that clock based on what the skills do and stuff like that. And even when you look at your likes of the frames, and this is maybe he's venturing into the marketing kind of stuff, which we'll maybe pick back up again a little bit later. But I do know a couple of people. Have you tried the frames, Dustin?
No. It's this ties into a question that I'll have later as well, but it's, I think, US only at the moment. And Paul, by the mention of US only, you probably know which question's coming.
Which you want to know,
Yeah. Well, okay. We'll get to the frames. But one of the questions, and this is related to APL. Brian is asking. He said it's one for the marketing chat potentially, but what's the situation with the kind of Echo glasses in terms of, given that they're only available in the US, what's the situation with that? And so one thing is any feedback from customers using it and all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing is there anything else that something like glasses would be able to do with APL that might not be possible with other kind of devices?
Yeah, I mean, the on-the-go devices have different signals that you can use in your skill. Like, for example, you can, use location, right? And you can say what's going on at this particular place and things like that. And so, but I certainly imagine that you'll get more and more of those sort of capability checks, right? Like right now, you can do a capability check between, does it have a screen? Is it moving? And you can imagine for auto, there's going to be a set of these capabilities you've got to be able to know about. And for, your earbuds, your glasses, like the more custom and the more context you can provide to skill builders, the more they're going to be able to make that experience just spot on for that kind of context. And that's, like you said about APL, that's kind of where you want it all to head, is like, if this is about ambient computing and about just being able to get what you need from your stuff whenever you want, like you got to be able to present the results in the most appropriate way. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have another question from Steve. He heard the controls framework discussion and wants to know if you can talk about what the future, the vision for controls framework is going to be, or what does that look like?
Yeah, well, you can start to see that now. You have the ability to do 2 pretty distinct things in a really great way. One is route logic throughout your skill way more effectively than you could have before. And the second is, once you get somewhere, you can actually build a control out of it, and you can reuse that control. So you can, you can come up with something like I think one of the examples they have is give me a number, right? And you build a number control. Now that sounds really super simplistic. A number control is probably just reading a slot value, but it's actually a little bit more than that, because what if in your experience you notice that, like, we have these ASR evaluation tools that you can use now, a bunch of accuracy-based tools, and you notice that a lot of people are saying 15 or 50 when you don't actually need to support that. So you could actually disambiguate when you get these weird disambiguating ones, or you could put ranges on it. Say, I don't want a number lower than 3 or above 100, and you don't want your customer experience, your VUI, to be like, here's all the constraints that you can do before you give me the answer. You just want to say, what's a number, right? And then you can get it. So anyway, the controls can deal with all those things, or more complicated things like schedule something and give me a start date, a finish date, all the different pieces, and it can do all the work to sort of dwell in that control as long as it needs to get its job done, and then it can route back to the main controller, and it can do its stuff. So I think it just gives you more compelling, powerful ways to compartmentalize your experience, and then to do the best possible logic and CX that you can during that compartmentalization, either through conversations or through the normal like skill programming at the same time. So
what I'd love to see as a developer, especially as a lazy developer, is Steve, other people in the community to create controls and then share those, create node packages and share those controls.
Absolutely. That'd be fantastic. Yeah,
Nice.
For sure.
That would be really good. Shout out to Steve from Double Labs. Thanks for tuning in, Steve. One of the things that we've kind of, Dustin, we've had a bit of experience in trying to kind of build around this in the past, and it's nice to see this in there, is multi-value slots. I know it's in beta, but it's in beta in all English languages, which is nice to see. And so, do you want to give us? So the scenario we've been in is that we've been creating a skill for a takeaway restaurant chain. And what we've been wanting to do is allow people just to speak freely about what kind of toppings they want on their burgers and stuff like that. And historically, it's been kind of challenging to try and cater for that. Kind of doable, but it requires a hell of a lot of work, really unpredictable. The error recovery, etc., is really painful. But multi-value slots seems to be a really simple way of getting around all that stuff. So do you want to give us a bit of an overview on what that is and how it works?
Totally. That was exactly the use case too. That experience where, I want to have something with topping, like toppings is a great example, because it's normally the way you would hack around this before was you would say topping 1, topping 2, topping 3, topping 4, and you would actually have to build one that has only 1 topping, and one that has 2 toppings, one that has 3 toppings, and one that has 4 toppings. It just gets kind of cumbersome and tedious. And then in your code, you have to go like, okay, how many toppings did I get, and which numbers are they now? I need to recombine them into a list, and there's a bunch of processing you would have to do. And so now it's just like, here, I got a list of toppings. So that's exactly the scenario that it's about, and it just makes it much simpler for you to be able to handle those kinds of cases. And that's available, as you said, to all custom skills, and it's also in Alexa Conversations.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think so. Steve again has asked, will there be a way to share controls publicly? I think we answered that, didn't we, by having reusable controls that you can share.
Yeah, and Mike replied as well in the chat, sharing GitHub and NPM might be options.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah,
I think Steve, you should just give me a ring and talk about what kind of controls you want to make, and we can figure out how to best share and expose those. I mean, the stuff you guys do at Dabble Labs is amazing, and so happy to dive in and make sure that works really easily for you.
Cool.
Speaking of sharing, maybe a segue into the marketing side. A couple of things actually related to sharing. One is sharing interactions with mobile apps. Not exactly marketing, but you can start integrating with mobile apps as well. What was the thinking behind that? It's what are developers going to be able to do with that they weren't able to do before?
Yeah, well, I guess the thinking was from the customer's perspective. And there are times where you say, I want to use my phone. I mean, there's just a lot of use cases where you want to use your phone. I mean, it's an awesome piece of hardware. And so, I mean, obvious examples of that is like I'm booking a car somewhere and I want to see the map, and I want to see the map updated, and just show me the map. So you send it over there. Or one of the ones that was maybe kind of more fun was, I can just say start TikTok, and it'll start recording my TikTok. My phone will start doing it, but I don't have to run up and hit the thing and then come back and do it, right? So yeah, all those scenarios. I also think there's a really nice experience that you can do, which is like a continuation experience. Like you start doing something in Alexa, and maybe your Alexa experience covers some percentage of the total value that you offer customers. Your Alexa experience is a portion of it. And so then you'd say, hey, I can totally help you with that in the mobile app. Can we just go over there? And you just go over there, and it just gives you another exit point. So yeah, I mean, it's just really those cases where a phone is the best solution, right?
I've got another theory. Well, not theory, but it's another reason for it.
Okay.
Is that there are I think I've done a video top 7 features for marketers, and I keep looking over there because the whiteboard's I've got things circled on the whiteboard which has got all the features on there. And the thing is that you can't do everything on Alexa right now anyway. I can't gamble on Alexa. Can't put a bet on the football match on Alexa because the policy, and same with Google, the policy is that you can't gamble because, we'll get onto the personal voice profile stuff in a minute, but there's no way of you telling that I'm old enough. In the EU, there's banking regulations so that you can't actually make financial transactions through voice assistants.
Sure.
There's all kinds of things like this. And what the app integrations allow businesses to do and brands to do is, one, leverage the existing technology you've already got in the app, the existing stuff that the user's already got on the phone. But then 2 is still get your foot into the kind of voice first world, still learn, still provide value in terms of trimming down and making that front end of the journey seamless. But it allows you to kind of have a route into doing more transactional stuff that might not be possible right now where it's needed, essentially.
Yep, that's an excellent use case. Zynga is doing a lightweight version of that where they have like a companion training experience, and then you go over to Words with Friends and you go to the full experience. So yeah, I think those kinds of, that's exactly what it's about. It's just help your customers get their jobs done no matter what they're trying to do, right? So
yeah. And it's there's another thing related to that, but what I was kind of pleased to see is that there's quite a lot of stuff in there about mobile, quite a lot of things in there that are related to mobile, that being one of them, getting into app functionality and stuff like that, which I think is valid. And the other one is the quick links. Being able to go from a mobile, it's like the reverse, being able to go from a mobile and then fire up an experience on the closest device to you. And I think that is, we mentioned at the very beginning in terms of like reducing the friction to getting 2 experiences. And for a lot of marketers, that's kind of been one of the stumbling blocks is the education that would be required to tell the user to remember their skill name. And what this allows you to do is essentially, put links in existing digital properties and then fire up a skill on a device closest to you, which I think is a really, really good idea. Do you want to, I'd probably butchered the explanation, but do you want to kind of give us a run through of what that is and where that kind of came from?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the, I was going to say, it's probably one of the simplest, biggest features, right? I mean, it's the simplest to take advantage of, and it's probably one of the biggest at the exact same time. So yeah, you put a link or a button in your experience on your mobile, and then when you click it, what happens is if you're already signed into Amazon, that it's all good, it just comes up and it says, here's your devices, and you click one of the devices, and you can either say, fire it up right now, and you can boom, and it's going. Or you can say, notify me about this. So then when you get home, it's got a notification ring going, and you can then queue it up. So like if I wanted to watch your podcast and I see something really cool come by, I just can't watch it right now, I queue it up on this device, I come home, there's a notification, I can do it. And the other thing about that is, if you do a quick link, you can put a tag on it. So now you can tell which advertising campaign that was about, and you can launch into your skill, and you can start to say, how effective are these ads? Are they actually driving the kind of traffic I want? And where do I double down? And what's the messaging I should use? And that feedback loop just wasn't there before very easily. And so it was very hard to experiment. Now you've got that. If you use the combination of quick links and custom tasks and drive people deep into your experience, you can do that. So I think that's super, super interesting. The other part is, I mean, they're very easy to do. You just make a link. So like, you can drop, like the Comedy Central team, the day we launched, they had a tweet that said, go listen to so-and-so, it's comedy, and you click it and you're going. There's no reason that you can't have a link to your podcast skill just floating around all the time, right? And you can just point people to it. In fact, there's no reason you can't curate a list of your favorite podcasts or podcast episodes, right? And then share those, so you can share other people's skills too. So you can start to foster this whole other sort of way of getting around and exposing stuff that boy, I think it's just going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge deal, and mixing it with the custom tasks, so that you're not just getting people to the beginning of an experience. That has its place, obviously, but
Get
being
it
able
deep.
to get people, to the functionality, to the right place, I think is wicked. What do you think of that, Dustin?
Yeah, and I really liked. I thought it was really clever how if you're away from your device, you'll come home, you'll have a notification there waiting for you.
Yeah, it's wicked. I think that, and again, I think that's in beta in the US, and there's definitely no reason why everyone shouldn't be experimenting with that, because even that example that you suggested there in terms of like a list of podcasts, even that reduces the friction to audio content consumption, because right now that's one of the biggest issues with podcasting in general is that you need a podcast player, or you're going to need to go to a website and listen to it. And some websites where you press the widget to listen to it, as soon as your phone locks, it stops playing. And it's just like, no one listens to podcasts on websites anyway. So the whole kind of discovery of audible content in general is quite difficult, even on mobile, if you don't have the app installed and stuff like that. And so this is kind of a way of almost circumnavigating and leapfrogging the whole mobile situation and just launching it in a native audio medium, which is, I never thought about it in that way. That's tomorrow's LinkedIn video right there.
Cool.
Sorted.
Yeah.
and
Well, if you do that tomorrow, I'll click your link and listen to it.
That's it. There you go. There you go. Sorted. Related to that then is custom tasks. And I'm a big fan of this as well, because combining custom tasks with skill connections, I think, is definitely where we're going to start to see a lot of interesting stuff happening. And Richard's got a couple of questions on this
Cool.
related to this, so we'll get back round to that. But custom tasks and skill connections, let's start with the connections first. So the feature around connections is, I'm just trying to have a look on my board. What was the feature around connections? Or was it custom tasks? Was that the feature that it was custom tasks, wasn't it? Or was it was actually broader availability of connections as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that it was that plus the custom tasks.
Yeah. So the custom tasks, do you want to describe what the custom tasks are, and where and how they work, and then we'll move into connections?
Totally. So you can sort of think about it, if you think about it from a customer's perspective, let's say you have a skill experience and it has intents and utterances in it. You can just launch the skill and start at the very beginning and do whatever it does, or you can go straight to the thing you want. So let me use music. I'd say open Pandora, it's playing Pandora. I say play Baba Mall on Pandora, and it's playing that stuff. It's just going right to where you want to go. So it's like a deep link into it. So custom tasks allow you to expose those deep entry points to other skills. So one of the very, very first ones long ago was printing. So a skill could call a custom task to print, right? It's kind of an interesting one. But so now you could expose your custom tasks to other skills or to quick links to allow people to go straight into the one thing you want. So maybe you would have something like, maybe you have a special in your travel skill, you have a special for a particular place that people might want to go or see or do, or an activity that you might do around your local city, right? Something you can just walk out and do. And so you could just take people, like you could target any kind of ads at particular people in those regions, and then it would go to that thing, and then you could track how that's working. And it just allows you to like really narrow it in and get the value straight to customers as fast as you can.
And so Richard has asked, is the connections feature still in developer preview, and is there any updates on that? Is it? I thought it came out of preview, didn't it?
I think so too. I gotta look actually. Let me look.
I'm just trying to find it on the.
Looking at the documentation, says still in developer preview.
How does it? Okay. Well,
the custom tasks are in beta. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other questions he's asked is related to a skill that has many features. So, for example, purchasing, product search, how-to videos, etc. Would it make sense to break these into mini skills, which could be used, which you then use connections to link them together? Would it make the flows simpler and clean up some of the NLP complexities? Would you recommend exploring that, or would you recommend keeping everything under one roof?
There's trade-offs. I think that is the capability, right? You can like break things down and move them around. I my initial take is do them on like holistic experiences, right? Like you skill connect, do your major task, and then you can do other things. So instead of splitting major tasks into pieces, I mean, again, you can implement it however you want. It feels like you want to keep them a little big. One of the beautiful things about things like Alexa conversations or the new control stuff is that it's doing a good job of managing state. And as soon as you hand off, you've got to, figure out how to rehydrate that and all that kind of stuff. So I think that I would pick your boundaries well, I guess, around serving a very well-defined customer need. But then, if you have some huge, enormous skill with all sorts of interaction model size, maybe you could do that.
I think there's massive opportunities, and I don't mind sharing this idea because ideas are worthless unless you do something with them, and I don't have any capacity to do anything with it right now. And I don't know, I haven't nailed the idea yet, but I think there is going to be potential in the future as adoption rises, as these features start proliferating, for almost like it would be like a reverse aggregator, whereby if you can find something that most skills need and play that kind of orchestrate a role of feeding off people's skills in order to perform certain custom tasks of value. The obvious one that comes to mind is taxis. Every single restaurant skill imaginable could link to the taxi kind of skill, and the taxi skill doesn't need to do anything then to actually acquire traffic. All it needs to do is just get itself connected to the right skills and sit there. And so, from a business, from a marketing perspective, it's not necessarily about always going out there and trying to push your quick links in front of people and getting them into your custom tasks. There may also be opportunities to try and find where the value is and what you can do that is hard for people to replicate. And then almost kind of just latch on to the back of other skills to add value to their users at the same time.
That's a perfect example. I love that.
And
then you have people that are experts in taxi CX, just really nailing that customer experience, and they go really deep, and you can count on them to. I love that.
Well, it's SaaS, right? It's a skill as a service. That's what you just came up with, Ken.
Yeah, that's it. Let's trademark that and get there quickly. So if anyone does develop something similar to that, maybe we can claim some kind of like copyrighted situation from it.
Devil Lab calls it the iframe of skills.
The iframe of skills, maybe. Although I think it's a bit more sophisticated than an iframe, I would say. It's a little bit like, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it is like an iframe, but it's also a little bit like, like if you buy something on PayPal, you'll actually leave the site and you'll go to the PayPal domain, and they've got the PayPal branding and stuff, so you trust that you're signed into PayPal. But then afterwards, it'll hop you back into your website. It's almost a little bit like that, isn't it? Payments. I know that it's going to conflict and challenge the Amazon kind of Amazon Pay situation, but that would be the kind of thing that might be able to do that. Although there's going to be more friction because Amazon Payments is all built in and etc. But yeah, no,
there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so another thing that I think is interesting is actually what we're doing for time. Time fly when you're having fun. You mentioned it earlier on. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, like it did when I was trying to fire up this broadcast, but it looks as though we've actually overrun. How we doing for time? Have we got?
I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good. Whatever you need.
Yeah, got a few more minutes on this end too.
Cool. Right. The one last thing I think is we've kind of touched on access and easy access and stuff like that, and I think this is related to that, and I definitely wanted to kind of pick your brains about this one. It's the name-free invocations. So for I mentioned it a few times, for brands and stuff like that, we're trying to get people into their skills. They've kind of been trying to train people in what their skills called and all that kind of stuff. And in some cases, to be honest, some skills, I think Nick Schwab's examples has been perfect. Like in the early days, he kind of like managed to figure out what a natural utterance would be and then name his skill based on that. So play some sleep sounds is a perfect example of just nailing the skill name based on the utterance. But for the brands and stuff like that, it's some of that has been taken, some of the obvious ones have been taken, and so they're spending a lot of time trying to think of what the right skill name is, kind of educate people on how to invoke it, all that kind of stuff. But name-free invocations has the opportunity to enable users to enter a skill to access functionality without actually invoking the skill, which I think is a really good concept. And it's been around for a while now, but Paul, I'll let you kind of explain a little bit about, where it's come from and where it is now and how people can use it.
Yeah, this is something we've been working on for a long time, and we will continue working on for a long time. I think this is a really important just part of the whole experience. So just keep watching this space for sure. At its backbone, there's this name-free invocation set of work that we're doing internally. So we have a bunch of AI helping to figure out how to route the right utterances to the most important or the most relevant skills and so forth. But as a part of that, there's a couple pieces that we've exposed to help skill builders point the system in the right way. And last year it was, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the name. The one where
it was implicit invocations or can fulfill intent.
Can fulfill intent.
Can fulfill intent. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I killed the list. So yeah, that was the one last year where basically, if what would happen is the system would send you requests and you'd say, I can do that or I can't do that, and then it would come back. This year, what we've added is a couple things. One is you can add multiple launch phrases. So today, a launch phrase would be your invocation name. So I don't know, what's an example? It's the vitamin podcast is your invocation name, right? And then you can add alternates. So you could say something like vitamin B, because that's the most common vitamin people are asking about. So you can, tell me my B facts. That's some, catchphrase that you have or whatever. And you could just add a few of those and then start to drive more top level experiences that way. And then the other thing you can do is you can go through your intents and you can say, this one's worthy of top level. So because some of your intents is like a yes intent, and you're like, I'm not gonna send anybody there. But you can, if you have something like, vitamin of the day intent, that would be a great way you can sort of top level that as well. So it just gives the skill builder more ways to influence that whole system and get more traffic through those more natural things.
That's wicked. Jeff Ski Kinsey has it's kind of harking back to the Jeff. Shout out to Jeff. He's mentioned, so we're talking about that kind of like the skill that might be able to sit in the middle of everything and feed off kind of other traffic to provide value. And he's mentioned Survey Line, which I think he was involved with.
Love it.
Could be an idea if you want to collect feedback, for example, on skill usage and stuff like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I guess I've heard that request for those kinds of things a long time, but the Survey Line stuff was a great use case for that. And it was definitely a lot of requests came from their direction about that, building that kind of an experience. So that's great.
Yeah. The final one that I wanted to touch on was so we've mentioned that there's some things policy-wise, legislation-wise, legal-wise, there's some things that aren't possible right now. Like I mentioned, financial transactions, things like that. There's other things that you might want to do that open up new use cases, but you kind of need some sort of control on it. The example I gave in the video I made, which was the top 7 Alexa features for marketers, was that, let's say if you're a retailer, you're Tesco or something like that, you might want to expose the skill for anybody to be able to go in there and find some products and add them to the basket and, all that kind of stuff. But then when it comes to actually checking out and making a purchase and transacting, you might just want only the account holder to be able to do that. And the voice profiles, the ability to use voice profiles has been around for a couple of months, I think, whereby you can kind of tailor what content is served to certain people based on the sound of their voice if they've got voice profiles set up. But then the skill limit access in combination with that voice profiles, is my understanding, will enable that use case I've just described to occur. Is that the case?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So you basically can give the experience a voice code, right? You give it some number or whatever, and then you have to say that number, and it has to be coming from your voice. So it's like this. It's limited to you now. And so if I say that code to my device and you overhear it, you still can't get into it, right? So it gives you a couple layers of protection there. So I think that's really great for that case you gave right there, which is like, now it's time to do the transaction. Do I really want to let anybody do that? I even think there could be some fun things to do with games there, where if you have multiple people playing the same adventure game and one person has gotten a certain unlock or whatever, they might be able to get into these passages and go on their way and get some interesting surprises or effective. I don't know how people will use it, but I think that would be really, really valuable for that. Yeah, that's a neat one.
Nice. Dustin, any final thoughts? Any other questions?
Yeah, there's one question I alluded to earlier,
Oh, yes.
and you're speaking to two people based in Europe, so I got to ask,
know.
when are we gonna get some more love on these new features?
Yeah. So how does it generally play out? So by default, our features are available worldwide, but there's a couple things that cause us to not be able to roll everything out worldwide all at once. And if you really look into it, it's where you need large training sets to go do things. It's really around those, how do we get the AI-based features out there as fast as we can? And so what happens is we deploy them usually in one region, often in the US, but not always first, and then experiment with it, get it going, and then we start rolling out to the next one and the next one and the next one. So we strive to roll them out very quickly. I mean, the international space is just really huge for us and super important. So it's as fast as we can. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's look forward to it. I mean, there has been some things that were announced that have come out to everyone. You know, the custom tasks is in beta for everybody. There's a few others. You know, multimodal responses
APLA is for everybody.
Yeah.
Web API for games. Yep.
Yeah. So
Skill resumption. Yep.
Yeah. So, but it would be. I think that's probably the question that everyone I imagine asks you that's not in the US is like, how can we get these? I mean, we're fortunate. Justin's an Alexa champion, so Justin tends to get early access and get his eyes on stuff every now and then. But yeah, no, it's. I'm excited, to be honest, by all of these features, because every single one of them is going in the right direction. You know, you mentioned on the go, and you know, we talk about that all the time and on the podcast, not just Alexa, but all voice assistants in general and voice user interfaces more broadly. It's like that's the kind of value of them, is that they can be there anywhere you are without the need to fumble around your phone and mess about. And so I'm glad to see one more mobile integration, because I think that opens up new use cases for brands that might not have considered it. I'm glad to see all of the name-free invocations and the quick links and the ways of getting into experiences be improved. I'm also glad to see things like custom tasks and stuff like that enable the kind of modularization almost of skills based on the features and the functions that they can provide. And then on the design side, the conversations, the multi-value slots and that kind of stuff, I think that everything has been a good step in the right direction. I'm just excited to, one, see the output of it, and two, work on projects that we can kind of persuade people to include them in.
I'm excited for the same thing. I guess the one thing I know is that computing will be different 5 years from now, and I don't know how. You know, and I think that this community has just been so amazing at diving in and pushing the boundaries way beyond what we ever thought was going to happen. And so now I'm just curious what's going to happen next. And so I would love to keep that feedback coming, right? Like, go try things and go experiment and see where they go, and help us understand where we should go next. And we'll just keep pushing, because we're at the start of something new. You know, it's really fun.
Nice. Well, your final thoughts, Justin?
I think this was great. Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. It's been, like Kane mentioned, a long time coming, but it's been definitely worth it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Definitely. Where can people go? Where can people go to, like, you know, if they want to learn a bit more? I know you publish a hell of a lot of stuff. They're probably, to be honest, looking at the people who have been listening and commenting, I think probably a lot of them already kind of know. But where can they go to find you, to kind of follow you, or to find out more about Alexa and how to use the stuff that we've been talking about?
So Alexa in general is developer.amazon.com, and all this will be right there. There's a breakdown of all these features and how they work and all that good stuff. And I'm Paul Cutsinger, everywhere you find people. It's Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, and I'm happy to chat with you there. And then for the conversations thing, if you want a part of that, you know, it's like a $100,000 prize pool or something like that. Part of that would be alexaconversations.devpost.com.
Cool. Well, we'll put all these links in the show notes. That'll be out on Wednesday. Thank you, everyone, for persevering with us at the beginning. And we've had a really interactive discussion going on. Apologies we didn't get around to all the comments. I appreciate there was a lot more going on in those comments than we had the capability to get to. But thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for the discussion. And we will be back on LinkedIn. And apologies for not getting that working, but we definitely will be. To be honest, this has been more engaging than a lot of the podcasts we've done on LinkedIn. So maybe it's YouTube.
I think so. Yeah. YouTube is the way to go.
Yeah, YouTube might be the way to go for us in future. But yeah, thank you, Paul, again, for, as Dustin said, you know, it's been a long time coming, but thank you so much for joining us. It's been really, really good having you along. And hopefully, you know, you let us know when the next 31 features are coming out, and we'll do this again.
I'll be here. I'll come to you first. It's awesome. All right.
Nice one. Cheers, all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
See you